All right. Well, welcome to Adult Education for Covenant Presbyterian Church. It's May 17th, 2020, and we are continuing our new Adult Ed series. This is the second week, working differently in different times. This week we have the opportunity to hear from lawyers. Last week we heard from some educators, and it was just a wonderful, eye-opening experience about what's been happening in the lives of people that we know and love and people that we care about. This week, we have the distinct honor of having some lawyers share about their law practice, whatever that may look like. We have three different lawyers on the call. Well, we may have more lawyers on the call, but we do have three that we've talked to already. But before I introduce them, I'd like to open us with a brief prayer. Holy and gracious God, we give thanks for this day and for the opportunity to learn from one another. We pray for all of those who are working now, that they may do so diligently, that they may adjust well, that they may learn their new skills quickly. We pray for those who are not working right now, for those who are seeking work, or for those who are sitting and spending the time waiting. We pray that we may enlighten each other, that we may enliven each other, and that we may bolster each other. Amen. So I'm going to unmute our participants. Unmute, and where is oh my gosh, hold on, I gotta find it. There's a lot of you here, so I'm making my way. There you are, Betsy. Great. So all of our panelists are unmuted. I will do a brief introduction, and I encourage everybody now, if you're watching using Zoom, to click on speaker view. Gallery view is great if you want to see everybody, but mainly you'd just be watching people listen. So if you go to speaker view, whoever's talking will be highlighted for this. So that's the best way to do the panel. And so now that everybody's on speaker view, I'm going to introduce our panelists. And once I finish the introduction for you panelists, if you could just say hi so people see your face, and it'll go to speaker view on your face and everybody will see you. So the first person I'd like to introduce is Marge Reeson, who has a very long title. It is School Administration Consultant for the Special Education Team at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Her work focuses on special education, legal compliance issues, and she is the lead consultant for the state IDEA complaint process. Marge was a special education teacher in the MMSD for several years. And she holds a law degree from UW and worked as an attorney in areas of disability and elder law. Do you want to say hi, Marge?
Hi, everyone. Good to see you all.
And it was good to see you in worship this morning, Marge. That was, I think, the only time in worship that I wasn't being climbed on. So thanks for the distraction.
You're welcome.
The next person I'd like to introduce is Betsy Erickson, who is a principal at Jackson Lewis, which is a nationwide labor and employment law firm. Betsy's been practicing law for 20 years and focuses her practice on helping employers comply with employment laws, conducting anti-harassment training and investigations, and litigating employment cases. Do you want to say hi, Betsy?
Sure. Hi. Great to see everybody. Thanks for coming this morning.
Well, it's good to see you too, Betsy. And the last person on the panel is Raleigh Jones, who is a lawyer for the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission. He's a labor arbitrator, mediator, and hearing examiner. Do you want to say hi, Raleigh?
Hi, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you. And I'm so glad that everybody's able to make it. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is a good place to start. And this question is for Raleigh. So I'm going to ask a question of the panel. I'm going to ask it to specific people. And then after the first person answers, I'm going to open it up to the rest of the panel if they have thoughts that they'd like to share as well. And so that's how we're going to format this. So Raleigh, what do you want people to know about your work during the pandemic?
Well, as Jeff indicated, just for purposes of context, folks, I work for the Wisconsin Employment Relations Commission, and we go by the initials WERC. And that is the agency in Wisconsin that is the neutral party in labor disputes. We do not represent employers. We do not represent employees. Instead, we are the neutrals, or said another way, we are the umpires in labor matters. And as Jeff indicated, in my job, I wear 3 hats. Specifically, I'm an arbitrator, a mediator, and a hearing examiner. And what I want you to know about my work is that it is still ongoing during the pandemic. And the reason is because workplace disputes are still around. A lot of the stuff I'm dealing with now was in the pipeline pre-pandemic, and it takes a while for cases to get to me. But the point is that it's, even though many of us are at home, the point is that these disputes that employees have, employees are creative in finding ways to get their disputes before an outsider, and that's what I am. So before the pandemic, to do my work, I would travel around the state. For example, if there was a dispute involving the La Crosse firefighters, that meant I would go to La Crosse. Or if there was a dispute with a Green Bay bus driver, I'd go to Green Bay. So pre-pandemic, I would travel around the state, sometimes several days a week. Well, all that travel is off now, and for the most part, most of my work in late March and April was simply canceled, and it all has to be rescheduled when things get back to the new normal. Starting this month, I began doing hearings by phone. I tried doing them on things like Zoom, but it didn't work out for a variety of reasons. So now essentially I'm doing stuff old school, and by that I simply mean holding hearings by phone. So the other type of work that I do, the mediations and other types of hearings, that stuff is still on the back burner, and it's to be decided later how we're going to deal with that. So that's all I've got on that topic.
Thank you, Raleigh. Anybody else from the panel like to share anything?
Well, I'll jump in. Similar to what Raleigh was saying, I work for the state of Wisconsin, and our work has not stopped at all. And in fact, in some ways, our work has really picked up. So part of what I do is coordinate a group of colleagues, basically, and we run the IDEA, which is the federal law governing special education. We run a complaint process that is required by the federal government, that all states have to have one of these processes. And our work has kept going. We've had issues, complaints that were in the pipeline earlier before the pandemic that we've been dealing with. And then we have a whole slew of really new and novel issues that have been coming up as a result of the pandemic and of schools being closed, and what that's meant then for students with disabilities and their programming. And it's a whole new world out there, and it's very, we're getting a lot of guidance out to school districts and to families, and really it's been a real, it's all of our work that was ongoing has continued, and we have a whole new layer of work. So it's been busy. We've been hopping.
Yep, and that's been the same as my experience as well. The old work is still there, and there's a lot of new work as well. So I work for a private business, not the state. And what I do for part of my work is to give legal advice to employers about employment issues. And these days, I've been spending most of my time on that part of my work, not the litigation or the training, because we are kind of a 911 for employers when they've got big issues. And employers have had a ton of big issues lately, ranging from needing to lay off part of their workforce, to understanding how unemployment compensation works, to learning new laws and new employee rights that have been put in place over the last couple of months, to dealing with employees who have health issues in the workplace that are vulnerable to COVID-19, and how to handle and address those people. So we've been very, very busy as of late.
Yeah, I believe it. Sounds like a lot going on. The next question is for Betsy. How has your job been affected? And so we heard a little bit about that already, but maybe you could talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts of it. You know, what are some of the things that you've had to adjust to outside of the work that you've trained for?
Sure. So the first thing that changed was, just my physical work location. I usually work in an office with other attorneys, and I like that because I can go down the hall if I have a new issue or an issue that is thorny. I can go down the hall and get somebody else's viewpoint on it. And sometimes it just helps to reason through issues together. So for the last couple of months, we've been working mainly from home with kind of a reduced staff in the office. And so our staff in the office is, wearing masks and social distancing, and we're, cleaning the office, doing all of the things that people are doing to stay safe. But if I want to go into the office, I need to coordinate with my coworkers to make sure that we're not having too many people in the office at the same time, and that everybody knows who's going to be in the office so we can be aware of each other. So that's one thing. Another thing that's happened is just the amount of time that I've been on the telephone has really increased. One of the other changes that have happened is that the time frame in which clients need my work has changed radically. People need answers right now. And oftentimes I get calls with people saying, I have someone sitting, in an office with the door closed, and we need an answer because this person found out that one of their coworkers, wasn't social distancing, and we have a health issue right now. I've had a lot of calls where people have said, I can make payroll for the next 2 days, and I need a comprehensive plan for how to handle my workforce on an ongoing basis, given what's going on. I'm going to need that plan by tomorrow. And so I've been dealing with a lot of issues that have to be handled extremely quickly without the reasoning time or the thinking time that I would like. And something else that has changed is just the magnitude of the issues. When I have employers who need to lay off their workforce, what we're dealing with is a lot of families that are going to be cut off from their financial support. And depending on how long the layoff may last, some people might be cut off from their health insurance. And these are issues that have caused my clients and me a very high stress level because we realize that the issues that we're dealing with are going to immediately, directly impact people's lives, sometimes in a positive way and sometimes in a negative way. But the urgency and the stress level of requests has really, really increased. And then the last thing that's changed for me is needing to learn new laws. So I've needed to learn the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. And then I've also needed to learn the CARES Act. So that's about 1,000 pages of new legislation to read and digest that clients need answers to immediately. And so that's been an interesting process. And then I've also learned unemployment compensation law for about 27 states in addition to Wisconsin. And so it's been a pretty high learning curve for me. And I've needed to be kind of gracious with myself and being able to say, I don't know, I'll look that up, or relying on my colleagues who are nationwide to get some different resources. So that's basically how my work has changed.
Wonderful, thank you. And anyone else on the panel have a response to that question?
I'll say that the whole working at home has been a very interesting change for me. Sort of like Betsy was saying, I really rely on the knowledge and expertise of my colleagues, and we have a group of people that are, it's just a wonderful, really smart, fabulous, witty group of people that, I see every day. And it's a big change to now, seeing people means like seeing the way we're seeing each other right now. And that's a big difference. So the technology has been interesting, and I would agree that new information is hitting our field as well rapidly. When schools went to distance learning options like at the drop of a hat for all students. That was a huge transition, obviously, and many school districts were really not prepared for that. It really adds a whole different level when you're talking about children with disabilities who learn in a whole slew of different ways. Also, one of the things that's been a huge issue for us is that there are inequities really that are pretty in this whole distance learning thing. I mean, if you have a good wireless connection and ample equipment and things like that, your family can adapt pretty quickly. But when you don't, and there are many both pockets in lots of school districts and really whole parts of the state that don't have great access to broadband, it creates a lot of problems in general. And then to figure out what that means for a student with a disability who has an individual entitlement to an education that may just kind of be very much paused right now. So we got to figure all that out along the way. And it's been interesting. It's not been dull.
Yeah. So are you trying to say Steve isn't giving you all the legal advice that you're looking for?
He tries, he does try, but you got to take everything that guy says with a grain of salt. And so there you go.
Fair enough. Marge, you don't mute yourself yet. This next question's for you. So how has your faith come into play?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a really, it's been extremely helpful to me to have my faith in this time. I learned a long time ago that, really through the grace of God, difficult situations come and they pass, that nothing is really permanently going to be the way it is right now. So even during times of, a lot of change and a lot of stress and a lot of upheaval in life, I know I have experienced that multiple times in my life, that on the other side of something, again, through the grace of God, we have a new set of okay. I mean, people say new normal, and I don't know, but what I guess I mean is things are okay in a way that maybe they weren't before whatever happened. It's a different level of okay, or it's a different meaning of okay, but God gets us through this. And I'm so grateful to know that and to have had that experience in my life, because I know that all of this will pass. It also really helps me when I'm dealing with folks in schools or families for whom this is an extremely stressful time. I mean, many are, dealing with all the kinds of things that Betsy was talking about, companies that have laid people off, people who can't make their payroll. So their families are in a lot of stress because of those kind of circumstances. And then to have kids at home when you're not used to that, and when some of these kids have significant needs, it's really difficult. And so in working with both schools and families throughout this process, I'm finding that it really helps me to be able to, take a deep breath and just ground myself in my faith, because my circumstance, I know, is one that is, I may have some inconveniences because of this, but there are people out there whose lives are in great turmoil. And so grounding myself in my faith has been extremely helpful, and just helps me to not sweat the small stuff. There's a lot of stuff that isn't small stuff right now, but there still are things that I would consider small stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree. Sifting through the small stuff and the big stuff it's tough right now, because who knows what's important and what's not. It's quite a challenge. Charlie asked if he could say something, and since he's my boss, I'm going to let him. Charlie, you can unmute yourself.
I didn't want to put the car window down without your permission. So, Marge, thanks for your comments. And a lot of you have been involved with the Psalms Bible studies on Wednesday nights. And what you were talking about in terms of your faith and making it through the journey, it reminds me of what Walter Brueggemann says about Psalms, how some are orientation Psalms, some are disorientation Psalms, and then some are new orientation Psalms, the people who've kind of come through the storm and weathered the other side and see things differently now. So Marge, you're reflecting Walter Brueggemann theology. Good job.
Well, and I know Marge, you read so much Brueggemann too, so.
In all my spare time, yes.
Raleigh, Betsy, what else would you like to say? Is there anything you'd like to add about how your faith has come into play through this?
I guess from my perspective, I think it's been a really good touchstone in the stress of the moment to remember that everybody is God's child, and that's true when they're asking hard questions and making demands that are hard to meet, and it's true when they're asking questions and being upset about having to ask the question or about the answer, and it's been helpful to keep in mind too, understanding that things that I'm helping people do now are going to have an impact, a big impact sometimes on people, to try and keep that at the center and prioritize, honesty, and also to prioritize I guess just the best for each individual person who's involved in the process, and to try and keep that top of mind.
Thanks. Raleigh, what have you learned about your job that you didn't know before?
I've learned how important personal interaction with coworkers is. Simply put, I miss that a great deal. Pre-pandemic, I used to, when I was out in the field, I would sometimes work with people who worked from their homes. And they would, in essence, tell me all the great things about it. Well, now I've lived that life for a while, and simply put, I'm chomping at the bits to get back to the office. I've also learned how difficult it is to do research at home. At the office, I have a very extensive file system, and I consult that file system to deal with the various matters that are on my plate. And I did not bring that file system home with me. It's still back at the office. And there isn't a morning that goes by that I say to myself, okay, I know where a particular file is that I need, but it's back in the office and I don't have access to it. So that's just been very frustrating. I've also learned how tedious typing is, because I have to type everything myself now, and I'm not used to doing that. At the office, I have various dictation equipment and software that I don't have on my home computer. And so in that, as an offshoot of that last point, I've also learned how technologically challenged I am.
Yeah, pandemic will really teach you how to adapt to Zoom quickly. That's what I've found. What about you, Betsy, Marge? What have you learned about your job?
Yeah, I'll say I agree with what Raleigh said. The value of having, coworkers. I know that I'm really fortunate to work in the setting that I do with the people that I do, who are, very knowledgeable, smart, and passionate about, the work that we do, and, passionate about really protecting the rights of kids and families in a complicated system. And I really miss those folks. They're great. I would say too, technology is an interesting thing. I mean, I think so fortuitous. Our office, our department had just made the switch to Microsoft Teams. So now we have this, and it just is, again, fortuitous, because we used to, have our meetings all traditionally, and our phones were separate from our computer system. Now I have voice over internet protocol, so I can take my calls and everything just like I did in the office. It's all through my computer. Microsoft Teams makes meeting and collaborating really easy. And again, I mean, we finally got that in place about maybe 30 days before this all went down. So we're really fortunate. I don't know what we'd be doing without the technology. So I'm grateful for my coworkers and the technology in a way that I wasn't before.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's the connections, right? During the pandemic, it's become really clear that having connections to people is really important. In my work, it's been people with different skills, different areas of law, different knowledge, and even, you know, outside of my own industry. I've had a lot of clients asking about PPP loans, and being able to connect them to people in other industries to help with those areas has just been tremendous. But yeah, the value of being connected is just immense.
Yeah, well, thank you. And hearing that from all three of you, I mean, it does remind me of First Corinthians. The ear can't say, I'm misquoting it, but that's all right. The ear can't say to the foot, because you're not an ear, I don't need you. But really surrounding yourself with people who make yourself better, that is something that's being missed right now. So the next question is for Betsy. If you could go back in time, let's say 10 weeks ago, 12 weeks ago, what advice would you have given yourself?
I think the advice that I would have given myself would be, you know, first to adjust expectations. It's just not possible to do now, you know, what we were doing then, and to be kind to yourself and to other people as we're all adjusting to new expectations, because that's a tough process. The other advice that I would have given myself that I'm taking now, but I would have taken earlier had I kind of known how long this was going to last, is just to pace yourself. It's hard to work at home. It's hard with the increased stress levels. You know, it's hard to take on additional client concerns, and it's really important to unplug. And I'm sure that's true with people in other industries as well, healthcare and education and all kinds of industries. But just to set aside some time when, you know, I can put my computer in a room, close the door, and just be done with it for a while, to recharge and focus on my family, and just on thinking about other things and recharging batteries. So I wish that I would have started that earlier.
Thanks, Betsy. How about you, Raleigh or Marge? What would you have told yourself, poor naive self, 12 weeks ago?
I would have told myself to bring home more stuff from the office, more files, more paper, that kind of basic stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, I would say the two things are early in the going, I was working like out in the dining room, and that just was not a good thing. Make a separate space for yourself if you have the room in your home to do that. And the other thing is get a second computer screen pronto, because looking at one laptop screen is really limiting. So.
Yeah, we bought a desk chair. That was our first move. And then the last question that I will ask, although I might ask more, no promises, but what are the positive things you'll take forward from this once things return to, I'm going to use the word normal, but with an understanding that we don't know what that looks like. But Marge, what are some of the positive things you'll take with you as you move forward?
Yeah, I think the importance of being kind to yourself and allowing there's going to be some things that are just really difficult to do. And for me, one of the things I've gotten better at throughout this time is to say, okay, if I feel my level of stress or whatever getting to a point, I can take a break and I can go for a walk if it's nice outside, or I can go pet dogs for a little while, or I can go hang out with Steve for a few minutes, and that's really recharging. And so to allow myself to, get away from my desk, I'm terrible for doing that when I'm at work, just, getting out and getting away. And I mean, I work right downtown. It's beautiful in spring. You can walk around. I mean, there's so much to see and do. I just need to allow myself to do that. The importance of that has gotten really clear while working at home, and I'd love to remember that when I get back to the office.
Yeah. How about you, Raleigh, Betsy?
Well, right now, working at home is too much. I'm chomping at the bits to get back to the office, but at some point it would be nice to have a day here or a day there in the future where I could say, hey, I'm going to work at home. And now I know it's possible. And pre-pandemic, I did not know that it would work for me.
Excellent. Thanks.
And for me, I've made some new connections with colleagues in different cities that have been really great. And so that's been a positive thing, and I hope to continue and keep those connections when things get a little bit more back to normal.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. That's the questions that I have right now. But I am guessing that there are people who might have questions also. So now we've reached the end of the official questions. It's time for some Q&A. So if you have any questions, I'd recommend switching to gallery view at this point. Or you know what, stay in speaker view if you want, and I'll go to gallery view so I can see any hands that are raised. So if you have any questions, raise a hand and let me know. So are there, I think there are some other lawyers on this Zoom call. I'm wondering, the other lawyers who are here, if you're still practicing, do you have anything that you'd like to say? I'm looking around, maybe I'm mistaken, but that's the one I was thinking about. Hey, Jim, yeah, you want to share?
I'd be very interested, Jeff, if the 3 lawyers and even others who haven't been participating, like Deb Cohn, if she's still available, how have you had any adverse, you think you've had any adverse impact on your own lives? Have you been able to sleep? I'm just curious. We're down in Arizona, and I got to share with you that I have monitored very closely email, and I am more resolute than ever that I am retired because it has been awfully stressful in the employment context and in the education context, this new stuff. And I worked a lot with Raleigh, and he's as good as they come at what he does. So anyhow, if you could, just tell me a little bit about your own personal health. I imagine that's part of what you have to do to give yourself some space. But I'd be interested if there's, and I'd appreciate it if Betsy could assure us that Don and Barbara are doing okay.
Sure, and I can start with that. My mom and dad are doing well. They're staying home. My husband, Alan, is doing all their grocery shopping and dropping off groceries, which has been an amazing help. And and they're healthy and fine. And I think they actually may be on audio mode.
They are. So everybody says hi, Barb and Don.
And then to address the other part of Jim's question, from my standpoint, it's really been about stress management for me. One thing that I did early on when the emails were really flying is I took off my automatic dinger. Every time I got an email before, it would slide across my screen. But I was getting, I'm on my firm's pandemic team, and so every time there was a question, it would get funneled, to the team. And this was nationwide. So I was getting 500 to 600 emails a day, for the team generally, but they all slid across my computer in addition to the normal email that I was getting. And so I took off my dinger and just was looking at my email when I had finished one thing and could take a breath, and that helped a lot. And I've really been just thinking hard about keeping people at the center, and understanding that, things are hard right now and they're not going to be okay for everybody, which is a hard thing to understand. But what I'm trying to do is to concentrate on impacting the things that I can impact and letting the rest of the things go. Because there's, I would love to be able to fix this for everybody. And that's my own personal downfall as a lawyer, is saying, it's my job to get this fixed. And, there's just no one person that can fix all of this. And so I've been focusing on kind of letting that part go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, similar, again, to what Betsy's saying. I think, minimizing the distractions, because there's no question that everybody in their own circumstance, when they're trying to get your attention, they feel like it's their top priority, and you have to, get an answer fast. And when the emails are constantly flying, you can't concentrate on one thing enough to you start thinking about the things that are coming across. So I've had to kind of draw those sort of boundaries too, and prioritize for myself, because otherwise, it's just too much. And there's so much that we don't know, and living with a certain level of uncertainty is just something that's going to happen. And we rely a lot on information from the federal government, from the U.S. Department of Education, and then we've got to, make it make sense for the way we do things in Wisconsin, and then understanding that there's 440 different, school districts or charter schools that all do things their own way. And so, we can only do what we can do, and we're in a fortunate space. And that, I was a special ed teacher for a long time, so I know that, that you have circumstances where a child's actual education and safety and stuff is in your hands, and that's very stressful. Okay, that's not the case for me. I'm in an intermediate thing here, so I don't have to worry about, the immediate things. But for me to do my best work, and for us to give our best thinking, we have to really just allow that space and that conversation. And we were waiting for some guidance from the federal government, and we were really relying on that coming, and it didn't come, and it's not coming. And so we've basically had to write or do a whole series of guidance things on topics that people need right now. And we're doing it on our own. We're making good decisions, and, we've got a lot of really smart, fabulous people, but it could be that, once the federal government decides they're going to get involved, we may have something wrong. We might. We just don't know. We're doing the best we can with the information that we have. And you have to put a block to what you personally can accomplish to what, it's too overwhelming. It's way too big. If you can only do what you can do, and focusing on what you can accomplish is a whole lot better for everyone's mental health than trying to think about the big picture all the time. It's too big.
Thanks. Oh, Raleigh, yeah, go ahead.
I guess just to bootstrap on one thing that Marge said, she didn't use the word empathy, but I will, and that is that a big part of my job involves empathy and showing empathy, and that's very hard to do when you're not with people one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't come through in a phone hearing, but that's why I will be glad to return to whatever the new normal is going to be.
Yeah, I'll say, as somebody who works in a people job, it is harder. Deb Cohn, I'm going to unmute you. You also are a practitioner of the law, so I'd love to hear from you as well.
Well, so I've been retired for 5 years, but I did work for the state Equal Rights Division as an administrative law judge. And so I'm curious, Marge and Raleigh, what the state, what state employees, especially attorneys, or what you're hearing from the administration, and when you might be able to get back in the office. That's one question I have.
Yeah, we just found out just this past week, and I think it's going to vary from agency to agency. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what you say, Raleigh. Now, we work in, my office setting is cubicles, and we're close in with people, and I just can't imagine how we're all going to get back in and do it in a safe way. We just found out, I want to say maybe Thursday, that we are not going to be heading back to our office until June 30th at the earliest. So we've got a ways to go yet, and they've got a lot to figure out about the logistics of how that's all going to work, because I don't know, maybe like 350 people work in our building, and that's going to be a big shift.
Deb, I'm in a different situation than Marge is, in that my office is much smaller. And as a result, I think I could go back into the office sooner than she, but it still remains to be seen when I'm going to be going back out in the field again, and also how hearings are going to be conducted in the future.
Well, that was the other at least comment I wanted to make, is when you're a hearing examiner, I think judging credibility of witnesses is so critical. And if people are wearing masks, that really creates a barrier for being able to do that. And, then you can have some social distancing in a hearing room, but it's limiting. I haven't talked to my former colleagues recently to find out what the status is regarding that, but that's a big part of the job I used to do.
Oh, it's very difficult to do a phone hearing. I would much prefer to see the person, and be 3 feet away from them, but that's just not happening right now.
In a lot of our investigations, we've done a lot of our interviews and things over the phone for years. That's just been the way we've operated, and so that part hasn't changed very much. But making credibility determinations when you're operating with I would love to be face to face with people sometimes when we're having some conversations. It would help so much, but we've never really done it that way. So I don't, at least that's not a change for us.
And, I think even Zoom or, video hearings are limiting because you can't see whether the person breaks out in a sweat. There are all kinds of subtleties that you can't pick up in this kind of a setting.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions if the first one's brief. So if anybody has a big question, John, is that a question or are you giving a round of applause?
Actually, I meant to wave my hand. I'm not sure which one does that.
That's all right. It worked.
Okay. No, I just say, and this may be more for Betsy, although Marge made me think about this with the question of when law offices or the offices in which you work. I work pretty regularly in my role on boards of directors and officers of a couple companies, and then mentoring some technology companies. We rely heavily on attorneys, and I really appreciate the dedication of primarily the partners that I work with. They've made themselves available by Zoom or by phone, and we absolutely need this for some of the COVID-19 solutions that we're working on. We're trying to really move fast, and they've been available. Our difficulty of the attorneys that I've been working with, and they're mostly in larger firms, is their closed offices. It's a real challenge I'm sure you're facing as to how do you get to utilize those back office resources. So I don't mind so much that the $10,000 or $12,000 invoice I'm expecting momentarily is delayed, but there are other things that are pretty key. I just curious as to what you think is going to happen with your closed offices and back office things. And I just want to add that business guys and gals like me are probably a source of a lot of those unkind attorney jokes, and I want to take them all back because I've really found out during this pandemic how much of an integral part you all are to what we accomplish out there.
Sure. So I work for a national law firm. We have 62 offices, and we go, all the way from Puerto Rico out to Hawaii, all the way from Houston up to Minneapolis. So we're dealing with, a wide range of circumstances. We have some offices that actually have never closed. Our Omaha office is still, chugging right along. Everyone's coming into the office every day. Our St. Louis office is that way too. I don't know whether our San Francisco office is going to open up yet in 2020. And so our firm is taking a really different approach depending on where the offices are. We don't have a reopening plan as of yet. We have a committee that's working on it. The back office for us, unfortunately, is located in New York. And so I think our back office is going to take a while to come up. But there are a lot of bigger firms that have switched their back offices to places where the cost of living is cheaper, like Kansas City, I know has a lot of operations for bigger law firms. And I think to the extent that they're located there, they're going to open up more quickly. The other issue for bigger firms that I would mention is that we have a range of clients in a range of different industries. And while we're very, very busy right now, the ability of our clients to pay is pretty varied. And so with my firm, and I'm sure with other large firms as well, we have had layoffs, mainly in the office services back office area. We also have had reductions in hours. And so that's going to impact how we get things back up online too. But I know our legal assistants right now, for example, firm-wide, are working reduced schedule hours for exactly that reason. So, we'll see. My best guess is that operations in the Midwest are going to return more quickly in smaller cities, and the operations, at least on the East Coast, are going to be more delayed.
Excellent. Thank you. So looking at the time and being mindful of, last week it was nice out, but this week, we can't go outside, but maybe somebody wants to eat lunch. I would just like to close us by saying thank you to Raleigh and Marge and Betsy. And if we could do a round of applause. It really, one of the things that stands out to me is how varied the work that you all do is, but also one thing that really stood out to me is kind of the universality of what you guys are dealing with right now. Missing the people and being in the office, missing being able to be in person with folks. Writing sermons without commentaries, I know is not something you deal with, but having the files back at the office is something that speaks to me too. And I just want to thank you for being who you are, for doing what you do, and for working as diligently as you are while still being gracious to yourselves. This is wonderful. I hope you will join us next week for the next class in this series, in which we will be doing a panel discussion with, I'm blanking. I think we are doing a panel with university faculty and staff. So some professors, some faculty will have a chance to hear what's going on at UW while we're all at home. So I hope you'll join us next week at 11:30, same time, same place. The Zoom link will be in the connections email and the worship email. You'll be able to find it. And I hope you'll join us, because this has been a really great opportunity for me for both of these to hear from people I like and to learn more about what's happening in their lives. So I will stop recording in a second, but before we do that, I will close with a prayer. Holy and gracious God, thank you for your servants who work diligently and tirelessly, who care for one another and care for others. We pray that we may be encouraged by their service, encouraged to serve you. We pray blessings on their work, that it may continue, that it may flourish, that the work they do in helping others may be another brick in the kingdom that we are building together. Amen.